Hello, BookTube. I thought I'd continue today my informal read-along of Cormac McCarthy's Pulitzer Prize-winning piece of crap novel, The Road. I'm doing this sort of as a quasi-unofficial response to the ongoing read-along that's happening on Stripcover Lit, where Adrian and Dalton are reading The Road, and giving it a fairly thorough working over, despite the fact that they both have loved their fair share of Dude Bro Lit, of which this is a canonical text. It's not doing it for them, and it's fascinating for me. In a way, it's as fascinating to watch them react to the book as it is to learn, to dig deep into the book myself as I reread it. I'm noticing the certain kinds of things that annoy them both, and that's always fascinating. When you're here on BookTube, we follow each other's reading. Not just the books, but also the way we read. That's one of the funs of this. One of the fun parts of this whole adventure that we're doing is to do that. And so it's fun for me to see what gets people going, what really bothers people, and what pleases them. And like, for instance, I noted in their second video something that I noticed in the first video, which is that that Adrian, one half of the Stripcover Lit duo, will absolutely purr like a kitten if an author gives him eloquence, if an author gives him beautiful prose. He himself is a writer. He responds on a visceral level to beautiful prose, but oh my God, he reacts really, really strongly when an author tries to convince him that prose is beautiful. When an author tries to get verbally artsy-fartsy, it drives him insane. Same as me. It's weird for me to watch his videos and realize that some of the same things are irritating us, even though we have wildly different reading tastes. And I loved the outraged pragmatist in Dalton that showed up, especially in their second episode on the next 100 pages of The Road, because these next 100 pages that we're reading today start off with our main characters, the man and the boy, stumbling upon a bunker loaded with food and supplies and a chemical toilet and batteries and ammunition and cots and heaters and everything you could ask for. Loaded, shelf after shelf after shelf of stuff in this post-apocalyptic world that is otherwise picked completely clean. They just happen to stumble across a hidden door. They force it open, and they've hit the jackpot. They spend a few days in this place. They cover it over by dragging a mattress from a nearby house and loading it over the door. And it's mostly raining outside while they're there, and the rain keeps away, I guess, any interested third parties. And then, after a few days of eating their fill and cleaning themselves and cutting their hair and a whole bunch of other things, after a few days of that, they decide to leave. They decide they have to move on. They have to get back on the road and continue south towards the coast, which seems to be the man's goal, even though we don't know why. And that decision outraged Dalton. He kept going back to it in their videos, saying, you don't leave. You were starving to death. You were mere days away from dying of starvation. Here you have as much food and water as you can possibly use. You don't leave that. Instead, what you do is stay and fortify it. Staying alive is more important than a hypothetical threat of being found down the line. Adrian came back with, no, if you do that, you make yourself a sitting duck. Your choice of hiding the door to this bunker, putting a new bright mattress on top of is already idiotic. It's already going to draw the attention if anyone comes anywhere nearby. You can't expect the rain to hide you forever. So it was a radically different tactical outlook on this. Do you stay, guaranteed of enough food and water, and run the risk of being found perhaps by a gang that can not only steal the bunker but destroy you, kill you? Or do you stay for a little while, stock up with as much provisions as you can, and then hit the road again? Clearly, Dalton is in favor of the former. Stay alive. You've got guaranteed food, and you were almost dead. But the man and the boy decide not to. They decide to make the most of all of the supplies that they can find, not only in that bunker, but in a nearby store. They get a new shopping cart, new wheels. They decide to load themselves with provisions and take to the road again. And whether or not you agree with that as a tactical decision, you're still going to argue with this book in the aftermath of that decision, because I don't know what kind of shopping carts Cormac McCarthy is familiar with. I bet that he's never actually seen one with his own eyes. But the boy and the man are destitute and starving in almost no time after having loaded provisions. There's no way that that would happen. They load their cart with provisions, and it's still gone in no time at all. And also, they have a container of fuel for a portable stove, a portable cooking unit. And at one point soon afterwards, the man realizes that all of the oil is gone because the boy was drawing some and forgot to latch it closed, so it all just drained out onto the ground. The boy has been a monosyllabic chicken since the book began, but he hasn't been an idiot. He hasn't been someone who wouldn't notice that a precious commodity was draining out of the container. That's the only container they have. One way or another, in no time at all, after that interlude, in no time at all, they are right back to where we found them for the first 100 pages of this book, huddled under tarps, in incessant rain, in incessant ash, freezing cold, no light at night, miserable, and approaching the borders of starvation. But not right away. For a while, they have canned peaches, canned fruit, whatnot, and they're very parsimonious with it. And their parsimony with their stores of food as they wander down the road is tested by pretty much the only thing that happens in these 100 pages. And that is that they meet an old man who is also on the road. He's bone thin, he's filthy, he has rags on his feet, rags on his hands, and also is nearly blind. He can barely make them out, even at intensely close range. And they wonder, at first the man wonders, is this a trap? Is this a plant? Are there road agents? We're constantly told about road agents. We're never told what they are or what kind of a danger they represent. I guess you're supposed to infer that from their name. In other words, another example of the reader of this book being asked to do all the work of this book. Not some of the work, which any reader can legitimately be asked to do, but all of it. You're being asked to do all of it because the writer can't be bothered. But eventually they decide, I guess, because the boy is really soft-hearted, they decide the man is harmless, and they decide to give him a little bit of supplies, a tiny fraction of their own supplies, because the man is obviously just as destitute as they are. And then they leave him behind. He doesn't care, one way or another. He professes that he doesn't care. They stay with him for a bit on the road, and then they leave him behind. And there are some exchanges that I want to read you, painful as they are. When, for instance, the man agrees grudgingly to give this old blind man some provisions, we get this paragraph. Classic dude bro lit. Classic aping from the master. He untied the tarp and folded it back and rummaged through the canned goods and came up with a tin of fruit cocktail and took the can opener from his pocket and opened the tin and folded back the lid and walked over and squatted and handed it to the boy. That is a whole paragraph. That is one sentence. There are no commas. That is just classic dude bro lit of boringly itinerizing routine actions. Because it's supposed to have some sort of incantatory power. Because it's supposed to be the basic stuff the real men write about. Real men write about this sort of stuff. They write about it. They came up with a tin of fruit cocktail and took the can opener from his pocket and opened the tin and folded back the lid and walked over and squatted and handed it to the boy. That's what men do. And that gimmick was inaugurated in the fundamental text of all of Dude Bro Lit, which we will be getting to in time. It was done ad nauseum in that fundamental text, and it's been imitated ever since. That'd be bad enough. They hand the man the tin, and then the old blind man gets talkative. Now, Adrian and Dalton quoted from some of this wretched crap prose in their own video, but I'm going to do likewise. Because you can't help but not. They're talking to the man. The man watched him. How would you know if you were the last man on earth, he said. I don't guess you would know. You'd just be it. Nobody would know. It wouldn't make any difference. When you die, it's the same as if everybody else did too. I guess God would know. Is that it? There is no God. No? There is no God, and we are his prophets. Just exactly what an ordinary, weird, old guy on a road says. Not what a writer says. No, not at all. No, that's what an ordinary person would say. There is no God, and we are his prophets. I don't understand how you're still alive. How do you eat? I don't know. You don't know? People give you things. People give you things. Yes, to eat. To eat, yes. No, they don't. You did. And this is another example of a classic gimmick in Dude Bro Lit, which is for the author to realize in a rare and relatively infrequent moment of sobriety. The author's beetling along, writing out this crappy prose, and they get to a point where they realize, oh, I really didn't think this plot through. And now that I'm beating along, trying to get these characters from one spot to another while I write this wretched prose, I have suddenly stubbed my toe against a massive plot hole. And I can't just ignore it, but it is absolutely fundamentally against the rules of Dude Bro Lit to rework your own work. So you won't do that. That absolutely cannot happen. This is first draft garbage. That's part of the rules of the church. So what do? And the gimmick that Dude Bro Lit has used forever is to talk about it. As if that somehow absolves you as a writer of having it be there in the first place. So you have the man question this old blind guy about how do you eat? How are you still alive on the road here? We have gone through with these two characters for 200 pages how impossible that is. Even with a shopping cart full of supplies and a gun. How next to impossible that is to find enough even to scratch by. And that's with active looking, which is something that an old, infirm, and nearly blind man cannot do. We've also very much seen from these two characters that people in this world don't give you things, to eat or otherwise. They eat you. And so, when our two main characters encounter an old, blind, helpless man on the road, who has to have been wandering as long as they have. There aren't any Arby's nearby. He's been wandering in the wilderness as long as they have, and he's still alive. He hasn't been killed, hasn't been cannibalized. When they encounter him, regardless of what they think, the reader is going to think, how is this guy alive? Once we determine that he's not actually a plant used by road agents to trap people, then we're left with the only other alternative, which is that he's surviving on his own, and that is, in the world we have been given, impossible. And because Cormac McCarthy would rather die than rewrite his first draft, he realizes that, and all he can think to do is the standard Dude Bro response, which is to talk about it. As if the characters being aware of a plot hole makes it less of a plot hole. The man's question for this old blind man is completely reliable. Why are you still alive? How can you be? It's not possible. And the reason why the man thinks that is because it isn't possible. And as a reader, we're just supposed to be a pat on the head and sent further along in the book by the author who said, see, I know there's a plot hole. I know, little Timmy. I've addressed it by having my characters talk about how absurd it is. Now move on. I've done all I have to do. So the question remains. They leave the old man in the road. They leave him behind. He's barely moving at all. He can't see. He can't forage. Where's he getting water? How's he purifying it? How's he surviving this bone-chilling cold that almost kills a grown man and a healthy young boy? How is he surviving? We don't know. We're never told. None of it makes any sense. None of it's supposed to make any sense. Just move on. There's a kind of gnomic literary significance to finding a blind old Tiresias figure on the road, isn't there? I'm sure there's some Greek myth that we can strap onto the bed of Procrustes and stretch until it screams in agony in order to do a graduate paper on this piece of crap. It doesn't matter because the old man's gone. And when I first read this, my first reaction was the same as my reaction when I was rereading it for this read-along, which was when the man and the boy leave the old man behind and their food stores start to run low and they start to starve and the man starts to worry about when they get weak, they'll get too weak to fight their way back. My first reaction when I first read this was, who cares? You might have created some kind of narrative tension or sympathy with that struggle against starvation in the first 200 pages before you showed me that it's possible for literally anyone to do this and not die. You might have built that suspense then. But now that you've shown me that an infirm, addled, and blind old man can survive the exact same circumstances, then of course the boy and the man are going to survive. Literally anyone could survive, because you've just shown us that. And when it was pointed out by your own characters that that isn't true, that this man shouldn't be alive, you ignored it. Well, okay. So you've got that plot hole just hanging over the book. And so in the pages that follow, when the man and the boy start to starve to death again, I thought, who cares? It doesn't mean anything. If a blind old man who can't find his own food is surviving because people give him things, then these two will survive. But as they start to get further south towards population centers, they start to encounter not only other plot holes. It's here that we see that Cormac McCarthy did not in any way think out what the starting event, the inciting event was of this whole post-apocalyptic world. In other words, he doesn't know what the apocalypse is. It's not that he knows and he's being intentionally vague in order for readers to guess at a whole bunch of alternatives. It's that he himself doesn't know. There's ash everywhere except when there's not. Adrian points out that in many places where they're walking through fields. Grass, dirt, where's the ash? That's not how ash works. It's either everywhere or it's nowhere. And they're obviously they're drinking water out of rainwater and they're drinking stream water. So this post-apocalypse cannot be nuclear, or they'd be dead. But it's in these 100 pages that we're reading today that as they move further south, they start to see people melted into roads, people scarred and burned out of all recognition. So there was some sort of catastrophic fire event that people could see coming and try in vain to flee. And none of that makes any sense. You cannot, once you get to this point, you cannot any longer in this book backtrack and piece together an apocalypse that actually makes sense. And I can just hear it. I can just hear the Dude Bro enthusiasts saying, well, what difference does that make? That's not what the book's about, man. The book's about fathers and sons. It's about carrying the light. It's about surviving, man. But no, you don't get to do that. A world-straddling apocalypse has not happened. It has not happened in the world, which means if you're going to put it in a book, you are creating it. And if you are creating it, even if you're not going to call the crappy end result science fiction, which of course Cormac McCarthy won't do, and his fans won't call it science fiction, and good for them, because good science fiction is 10 times better than this garbage. But if you're going to create it in your book, then it becomes something in your book that you have created. Same as your characters, same as the landscape, same as the structure of the action. You can't just invoke it and then say, I don't want to create it. You can't do that unless you're Dude Bro, Arthur, in which case you'll do precious little else. But nevertheless, whether a lot of people do it or not, it is still a fundamental abrogation of one of the fundamental duties of an author. This author needed this apocalypse in order to write this book. There is no book without it. It therefore is this author's duty to know what he's talking about when he writes about that thing, instead of having it blatantly contradict itself. And it does. It maybe hadn't before now, but in these sections it does. There is no inciting catastrophe that could account for all of these different after effects that isn't nuclear, and it can't be nuclear. So one way or another, in addition to, I mentioned before in the last week that Dude Bro Lit loves to do that pointless itinerary. They love to do that. You encounter a safe hold with shelves of things on it. You're supposed to name everything that's on the shelf. Doesn't matter. None of it's ever going to come back into play again. But you're still supposed to inventory it, because men care about things on shelves. Men care about Home Depot. So you're supposed to give the exact make, model, and heft, and weight, and handle diameter of an axe, even though no one ever touches it again, even though it's not brought up again. You're supposed to give a list of all of the different ammunition calibers, even though none of them matter, or one of them does, and only one. You're supposed to, a man goes to a knapsack, opens a tin of preserved fruits, brings it back and hands it to his son. A good author will do that in less than one sentence. But no, you're supposed to itemize every single movement in that, and it's supposed to mean something. Last time I mentioned those inventories are a hallmark of Dude Bro Lit. There's another thing I mentioned last time that is also a hallmark of Dude Bro Lit, and that is what in any other kind of writing would be called by its accurate name, purple prose. Hysterically overwritten prose. Prose, in other words, that is suddenly written in a register far and away more operatic and ridiculous than the register of the rest of the prose, so that it sticks out. And the only reason that you can have for that to stick out is if it is attributable to someone. If it's just you as an author using one steady tone, like I walked over to my knapsack, I pulled out a can opener, I opened the can opener, I took out the material, I walked back across the road. Very humdrum, quotidian prose. If that is the normal register of your book, and it is certainly the normal register of this book, then anytime that you dramatically deviate from that into purple prose, into screaming operatics, you have to have a reason. Typically, the reason is because it is the words in the mouth of someone who always thinks that way. It can't be that your own narrative register changes and then changes back again, unless you are a posturing amateur. So, ladies and gentlemen, they began to come upon, from time to time, small cairns of rock by the roadside. Cairns are made of rock. So, just to specify, they came upon cairns of rock, as opposed to cairns of butter. They were signs in gypsy language, lost paterans. The first he'd seen in some while, common in the north, leading out of the looted and exhausted cities, hopeless messages to loved ones and lost and dead. By then all stores of food had given out, and murder was everywhere upon the land. The world soon to be largely populated by men who would eat your own children in front of your eyes, and the cities themselves held by corps of blackened looters who tunneled among the roots and crawled from the rubble, white of tooth and eye, carrying charred and anonymous tins of food in nylon nets like shoppers in the commissaries of hell. The soft black talc blew through the streets like squid ink uncoiling along the seafloor, and the cold crept down, and the dark came early, and the scavengers passing down the steep canyons with their torches trod silky holes in the drifted ash that closed behind them silently as eyes. Out on the roads, the pilgrims sank down and fell over and died, and the bleak and shrouded earth went trundling past the sun and returned again as trackless and as unremarked as the path of any nameless sister world in the ancient dark beyond. How even a Dude Bro fan can come across a passage like that and simply not laugh in absolute derision of this author is beyond me. And passages like that pop up out of nowhere in every one of Cormac McCarthy's books. There cannot be a reader so stupid as to take that kind of posturing for profundity. There simply cannot be. There has to be something else going on here. Not to mention the fact that that passage, I'm not going to go over it again because it's unbearable enough to do just once. That passage mentions black talc blowing up and down the streets like octopus ink. We've been told 1,000,000 times, literally 1,000,000 times in the course of this novel so far, that the color is gray, not black. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because none of this was ever revised. No pencil ever went over this the first time that it was spattered onto paper. Anyway, as our section ends this time around, the man and the boy do reach the coast, and they find a boat that's half capsized in the surf just a little way beyond the jetty. And they proceed to loot it. It has stuff on board that they can use, including some supplies. And we have been told countless times in this section of the book that these roads have been well-traveled. Are well-traveled, that the whole world is picked clean by roving bands of people, not just individuals, but roving bands of people all over this area. This was a highly populated area, and it's been years. Everyone has had a chance to pick over these things, and I'm thinking that a capsized boat full of supplies just off the waterline, it's kind of obvious, it's kind of visible. But nevertheless, the reason it's there and the reason that it has supplies that the man and the boy can use is because, as Cormac McCarthy has made clear in this section, as he did in the previous section, if they don't find something, they will die. He hasn't made any precautions for that, so he needs to reach into the narrative and keep them from dying, because he has more to do with them. And when they're on the beach and they're with the boat and they start philosophizing, they start asking whether or not there are other boats maybe out at sea. They start wondering if maybe there's a man and a boy on a distant shore thinking about this shore. They start asking about going to Mars or other planets and what it would be like there. We've never seen anything like that before, and it's right at the end of this section of what we're reading for today, almost the last page, that the man says, well, I don't think any of those scenarios are true, but there are still people out there, good people, not just cannibals and roving bad guys and road agents or whatever they are, and not just crazy blind men, but good people. There are good people in the world, like us, people carrying the fire, just like we are, good guys. They're out there, and we'll find them. Page 207. Not a mention of such people or a quest to find them anywhere in the rest of this book. Here it is, all of a sudden. Only, I would argue, because it was at this point that Cormac McCarthy, typing this ostentatiously on a manual typewriter, just so that he can have the pleasure of telling people that he types on a manual typewriter. It types from his notes, which are, of course, done in longhand on a yellow legal pad. God, I know this guy's playbook like I wrote it myself. Jeez Louise. They don't ever vary from it. It's a church, not a literary movement. But it was at that point, typing on his manual typewriter, that Cormac McCarthy realized, well, yeah, they should have some reason for doing any of this. Why does the man want to go to the coast? What is he looking for? Why are they bothering? Except for the temperature, except for it to get warmer. Although that's not helping. We're 200-something pages in. They're still freezing to death every night. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our read-along for now. So I will link the Strip Her Lit video down below of their reading, and we move on next time to the final third of the road. And then they are going to do on their channel, they're going to do a review of the whole thing. And I may participate. So anyway, that is another hideously long video. We will reconvene next time for the rest of the road. Thank you, Book 2.